Monday, and it's a very, very special Monday because we have a farmer with us today that raises chickens, and we're going to learn all about what she does here in Alberta. And we want to say hello. And my name is Laurie Williamson, and I work with a company called Agriculture for Life. And Agriculture for Life is a very fun, special organization because we get to work with students and teachers and families all across Alberta, and we get to tell the story of agriculture. So we learn where our food comes from. We learn about all kinds of careers in agriculture. And so we welcome you here today. And it is a special day. We're in March, and March is Canadian Agriculture Literacy Month. And that's a whole lot to say. What it really means is students all across Canada are learning about agriculture and where their food comes from. So today we're in Alberta, but there's students in every province across Canada learning about food and farming and agriculture. So it is a very, very special month. Today we are very, very excited. We have Farmer Tara with us, and she is a chicken expert. And so she knows everything about chickens, or at least maybe almost everything. We'll see if we have some questions for her at the end, but she's going to introduce herself as we go through the presentation. If you have any questions, please have your teacher put them in the chat, and then we'll have time during the presentation to answer some of those questions. So I will stop talking and I will hand over the mic to Farmer Tara. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, everyone. It's really exciting for me to be here today. So there's a little video that I put together, and you're going to watch it fairly soon. There'll be maybe some big words in there that you might not understand. So if like was said, if you have some questions, go ahead and ask your teacher, and maybe I can answer them afterwards. I can make them a little bit more simpler for you to understand. So what you're going to see is a video about my farm. There's no kids on the video, but I have 8 grandchildren, and the older ones all love to come into the barn, especially when the birds are little, and they like to walk around or sit with them and touch them when they're babies. But as they get a bit bigger, then we have to be very careful when they come into the barn, and they have to wear special clothes because we don't want to get our chickens sick. But they love to come in the barn. So I hope that you enjoy this video, and maybe you can ask me some questions afterwards. Hi, my name's Tara, and I'm a chicken farmer here in the Edmonton area. I am the owner of Prairie Livestock, and I've been farming chickens now for 20 years. So I'm going to take you on a little tour the next 38 days, aka 20 minutes, of what it is to receive chicks, to place chicks, to grow them for the next 5 weeks on the farm, and then to give you a glimpse at the end of how the birds will exit the barn and head off to the processing plant. So first, I'll just take you on a little tour of my farm. So I farm 58,000 birds, and I do that over 3 barns. So 1, barn 2, and then the office between barns 2 and barn 3. So in about 40 minutes or so, I'm expecting the arrival of 58,000 chicks, and we'll be placing them into the barn where they're going to spend the next 38 days with us. So before they come, I thought maybe I'd take you on a little bit of a tour of what we find inside the office of barns 2 and 3. So upon entering, you'll see a large white cistern. This is the holding tank for where my water gets treated before it gets sent through the barns and feed the chicks down the water line. So this is where we store all of our equipment, all of our supplies, different things that we're going to need throughout the flock. And this is also where we monitor what's going on inside the barn. So this is how it starts. Here comes my truck, and it is full of the chicks that we're going to place today. So loaded on there right now, 58,120 birds, and we're going to place that in approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes time. So while the truck is getting settled behind the barn there and we get ready to unload the chicks, I thought I'd take you through what the barn looks like prior to us opening up the doors and placing them on the feed. So this is a clean barn, fresh sawdust, lines are full of feed, water lines are still in the air. We need to drive the tractor up here in order to bring the boxes of chicks in. Here's our fans along the wall. I have 10 in each barn. Right now we've got fans 10, 2, let's see, 6, 4, 7, are all basically, we've put winter wrap on them. We were able to maintain the heat in the barn better this way. It'll save us on energy costs. With the high oxygen that's in the air during the winter flocks, we can bring in enough fresh air to be able to run only 3 fans throughout this flock. Typically in the summer flocks, we'll be running all 10 fans at the same time, and inlets will be open at 100% so that we can move air comfortably over the birds and keep them cool. But for now, we are in our winter flock, so here we are. Barn is prepared, and we're about ready to place our chicks. All right, here we go. Follow the truck in for a little ways. Leave the water lines up in order to place. We are now about to bring them down because last but not least, of course, the birds are going to be thirsty. They're going to be looking for something to drink. So the lines are slowly coming down, and I will stop them at just a point where the birds are able to touch the nipple and take their first drink of water. I thought I'd take a moment just to show you the water line a little bit closer up. And as I'm talking, I'm getting a sea of little yellow fuzz balls coming around me. But we've chosen to go with this water nipple because it's a lot cleaner for the barn. It's a lot more sanitized for the bird. What we want them to do is see the shiny nipple, they're attracted to it, and now as they're going to grow, we're going to start raising that up, and they'll always know where that water is. There are some barns that use something called a bell drinker. We prefer not to have open water. If we have water on the barn floor, of course it opens up the barn to different types of bacteria and diseases, and of course that's the last thing we need for our birds as we're growing your food. So I have a couple minutes while we're placing, and I thought I'd just run through the ventilation systems in the barn. So what we have here is a continuous inlet. Some barns use inlets that are on the walls lower down so that they can open each one individually. A little bit different for summer flock and then different again for the winter flock. These barns have a continuous inlet, so it lets in air down 300 feet of the whole barn. So the air is going to come in and it's going to flow across the barn along the roof, and as it starts to tumble across, it'll get pulled out through the fans that are on the far wall there. So every minute or so the air is changing within the barn. So here we have barn 1, very active chicks, been placed on the chick paper. This is the paper we laid down when we were getting the barns ready. So we have a cart that pulls this chick paper through and drops a ton of feed per barn onto the floor. And this is where we start off our chicks. And in due time, and very due time, they'll find, here I even found one here, they'll find where their source of feed is. and start doing what they need to do, which is eat, drink, sleep, and grow. Okay, I'm back and we're done. Chicks are all in the barn. Temperature is set at 35 degrees where it will stay for about 4 days, and it will slowly decrease over the 38 days until about 21 degrees, which is our target set point, just before shipping. The barn needs to stay at 35 degrees for the first 4 days for sure, because for the first 14 days of their life, the chicks can't regulate their own body temperature, so it's important for us to make sure the barn maintains a comfortable temperature for them. And then once they produce their own heat, we'll start to decrease the temperature inside the barn. I stepped outside the back of the barns, and I thought I'd give you a little look of where we store our manure. When we ship the birds, and of course all the barns have to be cleaned out, and we push the manure out. Unfortunately, but fortunately for me, the 3 manure piles that I did have been just recently picked up. A farmer from Lacombe comes in, and he picks it up every 3 flocks, so every 6 months these piles get cleaned up. He carts it down there, and he'll use it for fertilizer on his field. So here we have the empty crates from all the barns. There's our truck driver Paul, and our neighbor showed up. And of course we have Aaron, my husband, driving the tractor. So now we're going to load all the empty crates back up onto the back of the truck. They're going to head back to the hatchery where they came from, and they'll get a good washing, disinfecting, and be ready to use for the next round of birds at the next farm. Alright, so this is the computer system that we use to monitor our flock. It's called the Maximus system. It is connected to my phone, to my house computer, and here's where we can monitor daily what's going on and record our mortality or any other type of things we see throughout the flock. We can record this on this system here. We can see on the flock right now, only 1 fan is running. It's running at about 12%, I believe. My inlets are at 0, which you can see right here. There's so much, this is an older barn, so there's a lot of little cracks or so we are pulling through enough oxygen even if I have my inlets closed tight, and I'll keep them closed tight for the first 2 weeks. My circulation fans are running. I can see what my humidity is in the barn. We're sitting at 47%. We know how much the birds are weighing. They can step on the scale there. We know how much water they're drinking. We monitor how many liters per day per head, or right now it's milliliters per head per day. Lights are running at 100%. So basically what we're going to see here is just what's going on inside the barn. So if I'm away from the farm, running errands in town, for instance, I'm able to go onto my phone, check on things that are in the barn. If an alarm goes, I'll get a text from this system, and I'll be able to do a lot of things from my phone to correct that alarm. But worst case scenario, of course, I'd have to come home quickly and assess what the alarm was for. So the birds have been with us now for 9 days. They are weighing in this morning at 213 grams on the scale. Slightly behind the charted schedule, but not too concerned considering it's only the middle of the 2nd week that they're here. They are drinking 80 mils of water per head per day. I've already raised the feed lines to accommodate their growth. You can see already how they're stretching there. Another thing that happens now is their wings, their full white feathers start to appear on their wingtips. That's also a good sign. This starts around 7 days or so that you'll start to see their feathers grow. It's very comfortable in here. Temperature is 30.1, so we're already coming down on the curve to allow for the fact that the birds are now starting to begin to generate their own heat, so we can start reducing the temperature. It will really start to drop again around day 14 as the birds start to fill up the barn. So yeah, so far litter is amazing, light and loose. They're very comfortable. They're spread out across the whole barn, which is a good sign for a farmer. They show that they are very comfortable in here. If they weren't, there'd be signs such as being tucked up against the wall, looking for cool if they're too warm, or they'd be huddled in groups if they were too cold. All signs that we want to check to see what our environment is inside. They're really giving you an indication of how they feel. The morning of day 15, and the birds are now weighing in at 392 grams. They are drinking roughly 136 milliliters per head per day. It is also now down to 28 degrees in the barn. It's very comfortable in here. It's around 60% humidity, so our humidity has risen over the past week, but there's been a lot more moisture, of course, added to the litter. And the birds are still extremely comfortable. We've been raising our water lines, raising our feed lines. Now the birds are starting to stretch their necks so that we have the water go straight down instead of having them dip their heads to take a drink, which then can increase moisture on the barn floor as well. The birds have now been in the barn for 23 days. This morning the humidity rose to about 70%, but it's quite humid outside, so it's understandable that it will get a bit more humid inside the barn. The birds are now weighing around 1 kilogram on average, and it's a pretty uniform flock. I haven't seen a lot of small versus large birds. They are now drinking roughly 190 milliliters of water per head per day. The barn temperature right now is 24.1 degrees, and it will continue to decline over the next week until I hit 20 degrees in the barn, and there it will stay until we ship them out. Good morning, it's day 31 in the barn. We're working towards 38 days to shipping. The birds are currently weighing 1.65 kilograms. Ideally, I would like to see them weigh around 1.7 kilograms. It could be just a variation of who's stepping on the scale. As you can see in front of me, there's one just hopped off, 4 are weighing themselves in. Humidity in the barn is around 67%. The birds are roughly drinking around 280 milliliters of water per head per day. Barn litter conditions are amazing. The litter remains quite loose, which is great. There's no stickiness on the floor, which can sometimes happen when you get a bit of too much humidity in the barn. Lights are now sitting at around 40%. I may drop them to 35% if I see that they become too flighty. I just need them to stay settled, calm, to eat, to drink, to keep doing what they're meant to do here, working their way towards shipping day. It's day 38, last day for the birds to be in the barn. We begin shipping tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. They are stepping on the scale this morning at 2.28 kilograms. They're drinking roughly 353 milliliters of water per head per day. They are fully feathered out. This bird is absolutely beautiful. It's grown according to the growth chart. The conditions in the barn are amazing. The litter is still light and fluffy. Even with the increased humidity outside, it hasn't caused any stickiness on the barn floor. The birds are comfortable. They've finished their cycle of eating, drinking, sleeping. They've gained what they needed to gain, and tonight we'll see them load up on trucks and head down to the processing plant. Look forward to seeing you later on. I will give you a run through of how we take down the barn and get it ready for shipping, and give you a glimpse of how we end the cycle. Okay, so you can see we've taken the hoppers off the feed lines. The feed pans have run empty, and our next job now is to raise all the lines up inside the barn. We actually have about, looks like 16 catchers show up tonight, so this is fantastic. Should be a quick pickup and delivery. Here's the semis that they're going to be loaded onto. This is 2 of 8 that will be leaving the farm tonight. Inside the drawers, they're going to be tucked up onto the truck. first barn is totally empty. So here's what it looks like after shipping. Well, thanks for spending the last 38 days with me. It's been a real pleasure documenting the growth of the bird here at Prairie Livestock. When I look back on the videos, I realized I hadn't touched on a couple key things, and I thought I would fill you in here before I sign off. One of the things I didn't touch upon, like when we entered the building, there was a sign there that said biosecurity. It's very important for us to maintain a safe environment. So biosecurity is that we need to protect our birds. So if my feed rep is coming on the farm, or if someone is interested in having a look in the barn, I'm going to ask where they're from, and I'm going to require that they wear special covering and then have special booties on their feet so that they're able to enter my barn and I feel safe that they haven't stepped on anything outside the barn or been anywhere near other birds that possibly could bring disease into the barn. So very, very important for us here in animal safety. The next thing I realized I hadn't touched upon is sometimes people ask, how did you get that bird from 49 grams on placing day to a 2.35 kilogram bird on shipping day? Were there steroids and hormones involved in the feed? Absolutely not. The steroids and hormones have been banned in Canada for the past 50 years. So we grow our birds based on their ration of commodities. If I find the birds are a little bit slow in growth, I will switch from a regular definition food to a high definition. High definition means I'm going to add a bit more corn to my diet. The birds convert that very well. It's a high energy food. It will help them with their growth. If I find like I've caught up to the chart that they should be following, then I can switch back to regular definition food again. And then second, of course, their environment is really big. So it's really important for us to maintain a very clean, safe environment for those birds. It does wonders in their growth. If they're comfortable, they're going to do what they need to do, and they're going to gain the weight that they need to gain. The other thing I didn't touch upon was that all fresh, not frozen, chicken in Canada is grown by a Canadian farmer. So there are 250 farms, family farms here in Alberta, of which I am one, and we grow for the province. So when we cannot grow enough, so say we had an issue that didn't allow us to ship the kilograms that we were slotted to ship, we will outsource chicken, fresh chicken, within Canada. So we say, if it says on the package, local chicken, we consider all of Canada local chicken. We are all Canadian farmers, and we support each other. So if our province falls short on the kilograms needed for that a cycle of our growth, then we will outsource the chicken somewhere else in Canada. So if you have any questions, I would love to answer them for you if we have some time. I know this maybe was a little bit longer than expected, but I wanted to thank you again. It's been a real pleasure, and I wish you well in your studies.
Fantastic. There was so much good information in there. I'm thinking I was taking notes. I don't know about the students. I think they were pretty surprised. I saw some jaws drop when the chicks were dropped in there. 58,000 chicks were dropped in, put into the barns. I think everybody was like, wow. All right, Helena, can you run us through some questions? If you have some questions, we're going to use the chat, and we're going to ask Farmer Tara anything that you wondered about during that video about chickens.
Absolutely. So it looks like we have a great question in the chat to start. So we have 18 chicks and 3 ducks incubating in our grade 3 class right now. And my students would like to know where your chicks hatch. Oh, I think you're on mute.
That's better. Yeah. So my chicks come from a hatchery. So the hatchery is a place here in Edmonton where after the hatchery has received the eggs from the farmers. So there's different farmers. There's egg farmers, there's the hatching egg farmers, and then there's myself. And so I'm growing the meat, but I need the chick, of course. So the egg farmer sends the fertilized egg to the hatchery. And then at the hatchery, they have these really big incubators. So they get the egg, and then they put it into these really hot incubators for 21 days, because it takes 21 days for a fertilized egg to hatch. So for 21 days, the chicks are heating up in the incubator. And then on the morning that they hatch, in the hatchery, they get put on that truck and they come to my place. So by the time they come to my place, they're only about maybe 4 hours old.
Wow, okay. That's really interesting. Yeah, feel free, everyone, to put your questions in the chat because I'm sure Tara would love to answer them. Oh, here we go. How many chickens do they grow through the year?
So we have to grow 6 flocks in 1 year. So 6 flocks times 58,000 chickens per flock. Someone have a calculator? A lot of chickens in 1 year.
All right. Well, with that many chickens, you must need help. How many people work with you at the barn?
I do all the work, and my husband,
Wow.
he does one barn, but we have 3 barns, but I do all the work. And it's not very a labor intensive farm. It's a lot of, I visually watch to see what the chickens are doing. And like, I know the video was, it was more meant for like older people to understand. So so when I'm in the barn, I don't know if you heard in the video, but if the chickens are all like huddled together, like when you're cold and you can like hug somebody for warmth. So it's really important for me to visually go look in the barn, and if they're all huddled together, they're telling me that they're very cold, and so then I can just turn the computer temperature up. But if I see them like spread apart and they're going against the wall where there's cement, then they're telling me that they're hot. And so can you please turn down the temperature? So that doesn't take a lot of people. So that makes it easy for me to just run the farm by myself. But the cleaning of the barn, I don't do that anymore. There's some things I decided I'm not going to do anymore. And so I do hire one person to push all the manure out of the barn again. But everything else we do mostly by myself, and my husband helps with one barn.
Wow, and I thought that was really interesting in the video too, and I'm sure a lot of other people did too, is you have that computer system.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we think of farming, we don't always think of like technology, but I'm sure that helps you with running everything on your own as well.
Absolutely. It actually, over the years, has been really good. So 20 years ago when we started, we didn't have this system at all. And so if there was a problem in the barn, we didn't know unless we walked to the barn and looked at it. So there was one time when I did not know that the water was actually turned off. So the birds were not drinking any water. And and it went for the whole day because I hadn't been back to the barn. So at nighttime, then I realized, oh no, the birds can't drink any water. So I had to turn it back on. Now, 20 years later, if you've forgotten something, the computer will tell you, you better go feed the chickens. So that it's a good thing to have.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
One class would like to know why there was a slide where you mentioned having periods of darkness. So why do you keep them in the dark?
Right. So do you go to sleep at night? I think so. So we have to let our birds have a nap, and it's very important. They need to have a rest time. We can't always have them eating and drinking because for one, they'll get way too fat, and we need to make sure that they don't get too big. And also it's very important that they have a sleep time. Just like you and me, when they go to sleep, it takes about 20 minutes. It's like the sun goes down slowly, 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 and then they know, oh, it's nap time. And so then they'll go to sleep. And then 20 minutes before they wake up, it will slowly go like the sun is rising in the barn, and everybody takes a stretch and they right away start eating and drinking. But they also will nap during the day. So every 2 hours, a chicken has a nap. So they wake up and they take a drink and they eat, and then they take a drink and then they nap. So even during the day with the lights on, they're still having a rest period. But at night, when it's totally dark, they have to go to sleep.
That makes a ton of sense. Someone would like to know how you got into farming.
Well, I guess that's an interesting question. I grew up on a golf course with my family, but I met my first husband. He was very sick and he died 10 years ago, but I met him and he was a dairy farmer. So I went from a golf course onto a dairy farm. And then when we moved to Alberta, we bought a chicken farm. And then, so now I keep chicken farming.
All right. So I know you mentioned how you distribute the feed throughout the barn, but I'm curious what that feed is made out of and if that changes from when they're tiny little chicks to the bigger chickens.
Yeah, for sure. Just like, so when you were a baby, you you started off with milk because you couldn't chew anything, right? It was, you had to just have milk, and then your mom probably gave you like that pablum stuff where maybe now it's like a pouch. You guys probably still drink like applesauce pouches or something like that. So it's the same thing with the little chickens. When they come in, the feed has to be very, very tiny. It's a very tiny granule, and it's filled with lots of a high energy, like, so there's soy in there, and then there's some proteins and some vitamins, and there's veal, like, yeah, just different commodities. So wheat is in there. But then as they get bigger, we change what goes in their food. And as the food gets changed inside, the size of the feed they eat gets bigger. So they went from a little crumble to a bigger pellet. And if we try to feed that big chicken all that crumble that the babies ate, they won't even touch it, because they're basically saying, we're adults now, we don't need baby food. And then they start eating a lot more corn. So corn is helps them grow.
Okay, so it does change, just like with people.
Yep.
You know, you have different needs through your life. Makes a ton of sense.
Yep.
What's your favorite thing about being a chicken farmer?
You know, I love living on the farm, and I love chickens in that it's easier because I'm a woman. I'm not maybe always as strong as a man would be. So a chicken farm for me is something that I can do. And so because I love agriculture and I love farming, it makes me really happy that I'm able to do farm chickens by myself. I don't need like extra help in that sense. And so then I feel very successful running this farm, and I just love the birds.
Absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. Looks like we don't have any other questions in the chat right now. I'll give everyone a few seconds, get your final questions in. If you have anything you're burning to know.
It's probably got everybody hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, chicken's good.
Yeah,
I used to grow, I can tell you, I used to grow, before I grew this really big bird, I actually grew chickens for Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm sure.
Wow.
How many people have eaten Kentucky Fried Chicken? Right? It's so good. And that bird is actually a little bit smaller than the birds that we grow now. That bird was 1 week less time in the barn. So now the birds are for 38 days in the barn. A Kentucky Fried Chicken, he only grows for 31 days. Also, I have a question for you. Do chickens only eat grains?
Thumbs
What
up
happens? Do
in
you
your
think
class.
if a mouse ran by a chicken, would he eat it?
Thumbs up if you think the chicken would eat the mouse. Thumbs down if you don't think the chicken would eat the mouse.
He would eat the mouse. Chickens eat mice. Even if there's a mouse in my barn, that chicken's gonna eat it. And there's also one more thing maybe you didn't know, but there's male chickens and female chickens in the barn. So those aren't all just girl chickens in the barn. There's both in there. And I know the difference because the rooster has what up here and the hen's got it down here. So we'll be able to tell there's boys and girls in the barn.
And we do have another question here in the chat. In grade 3, we learn about exporting. Do you export your chickens?
So first my chickens go to Alberta. So whatever, so my chicken now goes, a lot of my chicken goes to Costco in Alberta. But if we have too much chicken in the province, we'll export it to another province, but then our country, Canada, exports chicken outside of the country. So yes, I don't know if my chicken in particular goes unless we have too much in Alberta.
Right.
And would that be fresh? Would it be fresh chicken that's exported? Or are they frozen at that
Frozen,
point?
yeah, I don't believe we. I
Fresh.
almost can't. I almost probably shouldn't speak to that. When we eat frozen chicken in Canada, it's not necessarily Canadian. Anything fresh in Canada. So always, like I say to your parents, go home and tell your parents, got to eat fresh chicken because it's made by a Canadian farmer. Most likely frozen chicken in Canada is imported from the United States or Brazil or Chile. I believe if we export, it would be frozen.
Probably, yeah. So that's great. Now I know when I go shopping, when I'm buying my chicken, and if I go to Costco especially, I'll be like, whoa,
Yep.
this was one of Tara's birds.
That's right. All those big ones that are turning on the roasters, that comes out of our farms.
Ooh.
All right, and we have one last question in the chat. What type of chickens are these?
So these are called a broiler chicken, but their breed is called a Ross. So there's different breeds that you can get, but I always get, it's called a Ross 708, and it's called a broiler chicken.
Well, thank you so much. Helene, I think we've got our questions. We're all done from the chat, which is fantastic. There were some really good questions there. And we want to thank Tara for taking the time this morning to show us all about her life and her barn and her chickens. And now we know when we're grocery shopping to keep an eye out for her chickens so we can enjoy them. And we want to thank you so much for joining us. And maybe we can give Tara a round of applause or a high five or high 10. And thank you so much. And awesome. And we want to thank all you students and teachers for joining us today during Canadian Ag Literacy Month. And we will see you again real soon.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody.